I'm John Wells for thespec.com. 16-year-old Kristen Robinson had been to Hamilton before. She had never been to the intensive care unit at Hamilton General Hospital before. But this is where her road to the ICU began on a warm spring night. As she often did, Kristen hung with friends on the banks of the Chippewa Creek. She asked her friend, Kyle, if she could drive his car. He hopped in the back seat and she pulled out of the parking lot.
And so I backed out, and once I got onto the road, the tires lost control and we ended up losing control of the vehicle.
The car ended up in the ditch on the other side of the road after rolling over.
He said, look beside you, your arm's not with you, don't look, but it's not going to be there. And so I turned, and then I thought I was honestly going to die because all the blood.
The night of the accident, after I got the call, I went to the Niagara Falls Hospital and waited for the ambulance. It wasn't there yet. So I had called home and asked Paul to go to the scene. All he kept saying was, "It doesn't look good." And I just waited for the ambulance to come to Niagara Falls, and it took over an hour because they had to cut her out of the car.
Kristen was brought here to Hamilton General Hospital, a regional center for trauma, cardiac, and neurological care. The intensive care unit here is as good as it gets for critical care in Canada.
When Kristen arrived at the hospital, it was already 3 hours after her injury, and the nature of her injury was such that she had lost all blood flow to her forearm and hand. In fact, the arm was just hanging by two small nerves and a tiny bit of skin. Muscle death can occur that's irreparable and permanent at about 6 hours.
When I woke up in the hospital, everything was busy, and I didn't know what was really going on. And the tube was down my throat, so I couldn't speak. I was saying to the nurses, I asked her for a pencil and paper. I wrote to her, "Do I still have my arm?" And she said yes. And then I said, "Do I still have both arms?" And she said yes. After everything I asked, she said, "You're fine, you'll be okay." And I said thank you on the paper, and I wrote a heart with it. And she kept that note.
She suffered a blunt force avulsion type near amputation of the left upper arm. So in that type of injury, it's a lot of force, and it's not a clean-cut injury, so the amount of damage is quite extensive. It's not like a table saw injury where we see some amputations. As we see in this image here, which is a three-dimensional CAT scan image, this is her elbow joint, this is her ulna and radius, so the forearm, and this is her humerus above the elbow. As you can see here, it's definitely not a clean-cut type of injury. We have multiple pieces of bone and large fragments that extend into the joint. We know that younger people have better outcomes of all injuries, and in particular nerve injuries. And recovering nerves in an amputation is perhaps the most important and significant outcome in having functional and meaningful use of the hand or arm later in life. Two major nerves were actually intact, although they were severely stretched and obviously damaged. We thought she has her youth. It's not completely severed off, though, about over 90%. And she has two nerves that we thought, well, they might have a chance of recovering, and so we were kind of cautiously hopeful.
Every operation, they just kept saying it's a 50-50 chance that she could still lose her arm during the surgery.
It went through a massive swelling where it did not look like an arm that a 16-year-old girl should have. And during those days and weeks, some people would look at the arm and think that perhaps it would be better to be amputated. It's definitely was worthwhile at this point, looking back, and I'm glad that we proceeded as we did.
At first in the hospital, I could barely lift my arm, and we thought it was the best thing. But now that we're home, I have full mobility of the shoulder. I can move my arm anywhere. And then my wrist, I can move back and forth. And then my fingers, I can wiggle. Sometimes the index goes, sometimes it doesn't. The thumb's not there yet. And the nerves grow a millimeter a day. And it's to the point now that they're in my fingers and I can feel when I'm straightening my fingers, but I don't have like the feeling of touch yet. So I feel like the fact of me straightening the fingers and all the nerve pain, it's painful, but it's good pain.
During Kristen's operations, it's very hard, even though you have family and friends with you. You're not sure what the outcome is going to be. And you pray and you ask God for everything that He has to help you along. And pennies from heaven are from deceased loved ones. And I found a dime the night of Kristen's accident on the floor in the waiting room. And I knew that my brother was with us and he would watch over Kristen. And then the next night, we had Chinese food at the Mark Priest house. And the fortune that was in the cookie, you will have the support that you never imagined you will have. And what are the odds of getting a fortune like that at a time like this? And I carried the dime with me the entire time that Kristen was in the hospital. And I take it to every doctor's appointment that we have. And the fortune I keep in a safe place in one of the 3 journals that I kept when Kristen was in the hospital. When the ambulance finally got to the hospital, to the Niagara Falls Hospital, all I kept hearing Kristen saying was, "Mom, I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm so sorry." And I just kept saying, "It's okay. You're with us and that's all that matters."
I think about the accident every day because something like that traumatic, can't leave your mind. The amount of blood I lost, I shouldn't have survived that, and I shouldn't say that, but it's really incredible that I did, and it crosses my mind every day to think that I did survive. The kids at school start to call me the miracle baby because what 16-year-old kid can survive that?